Hey everybody, Mike here. You may remember me from Book Off Smile, although at this point that's old news. We're here today to talk a bit about Daylim's Smile AI. There's a lot to cover here, so I'm going to move kind of quickly. I don't even want to edit this because I've just got so much to say, and I've been holding it in for a while, kind of forming my thoughts, letting this kind of sit and stew for a bit. And I've got a lot of things to say about this project, starting first and foremost with I've actually known of and communicated with Daylim's, or I guess Smile AD, if you remember back in the day. Since I was a teenager, probably over 10 years ago at this point, I made the cover for Smile AD 4.0. That was a revolutionary project in and of itself, and Daylim's, or Smile AD, or whatever you want to call the guy, he's just an absolute genius. I mean, it's tough to throw that word around. It was thrown around with Brian Wilson, and now we're throwing it around with one of his proteges, I guess. And I got to tell you, the guy is just a genius when it comes to the tech around music. And with this project, he proves yet again that it doesn't stop there. He's just a musical genius himself. I'm sure that he would say that's ridiculous that I say that, but you know what? It's good to spread some positivity into the world. So let's throw around some adjectives and some titles. And he's just a really talented guy. So first and foremost, when I listened to this project, I was struck with a lot of emotion, and that's something that I don't think that any Smile project can really hit you with. You know, every once in a while you'll hear something and you'll go, oh yeah, I mean, that belonged in Heroes and Villains, or oh, wait a minute, you know, that part should have been moved here. That makes a lot of sense. Or oh, that's probably where that was going to go. With this project, it was very different. It was definitely not the experience I was expecting when I started it. My wife was probably the most annoyed I've seen her with me just every single day saying, oh man, I got to check to see if that Smile AI thing came out. I was seeing all of his community posts. I was waiting. And then we had a long car ride, 3.5 hours back home from New York to Massachusetts towards Boston. And I listened to the whole thing twice, and she listened to it with me. You know, she was there during Book Off Smile, so she knows quite a bit of the album herself. And I got to tell you, it was not at all what I expected. It was very striking. And I'm going to get into some of the details of some of the songs in a minute, but I wanted to point out that after listening to Smile AI, I checked it out a few more times over the following days. I downloaded it, as everybody should, to archive it. And I noticed it got quite a bit of traction, which is good. I'm happy. It needs to be heard. But I wasn't seeing as many articles talking about it as Book Off Smile. And I know this is going to sound like I'm like bragging about something. Abso-freaking-lutely not. I'm more just entertained by the fact that my project, which I personally consider to be a little bit more laid back in terms of what was done to Smile versus this is like a complete reinvention. The AI tech has gone from basically like a 2 out of 10 of the Wayne's World, turn it up to 11. I was basically at a 2, and this is a home run. This is an 11. And it's entertaining to me that the media really only wants to talk about these things when it's the first time, or like, oh, look at this guy used AI, which is our buzzword right now, to finish an unfinished album. Like, look, it's like some artistic thing rather than a deep fake. He's created something with it. Meanwhile, Daylim's goes out and completely makes an artistic statement with Smile. This isn't just a finished album. This is Daylim's Smile for all intents and purposes. This isn't finishing on something. This isn't in my opinion, this isn't really following up on Brian's work as much as it is being inspired by Brian's work and creating something almost completely new. I know that's going to sound ridiculous, but seriously, as someone who's listened to this for over a decade, 2 decades almost at this point, that stuff is, since 2011 at least, with the Smile sessions, I've had the access that everybody else has had. It's crazy how different this is, and in a way, that whole Book Off Smile getting a bunch of attention, even though in a few ways a project that I hesitate to call it superior because I think I like it better, but art really isn't meant to be compared that way. Like, I may like Day Lim's Smile now more than I liked Book Off Smile at the same time right now. But, that's not really how art is meant to be. I haven't seen him saying anything about that. So, I think they're both fantastic. I just happen to really like his more right now. But a project that I consider to be superior in terms of its usage of AI has been, it's got plenty of views as it well deserves. But it's just fascinating, it's one of those strike when the iron's hot type things, and it almost echoes what happened with Smile back in the day. Brian's driving in the car and he hears Strawberry Fields Forever and he goes, "Oh shit, like look at this, this project came out first, and regardless of what you think of Strawberry Fields, Smile goes in some wildly different directions and really pushes the boundaries. Strawberry Fields did as well, but I think a lot of musical people would say, while they're both fantastic works of art, Smile really pushes some different boundaries than Strawberry Fields. The instrumentation and things like that, and the modular arrangements. Although Strawberry Fields does kind of do that a bit, it doesn't go quite as far as Smile. But it's just fascinating that two big projects using multiple different pieces of AI, whether it's pulling apart songs and remixing them, whether it's, creating new things using the Beach Boys vocals, in my case, just Brian, and in Day Lim's case, all of the Beach Boys. And honestly, in Day Lim's case, he goes a step further and writes new arrangements and almost creates new songs in some cases. We're going to talk about Barnyard, you better believe it. Creates new songs in some cases where it's really something that needs to be talked about. And I hope that beyond just the views in this circle, this project gets discussed as a landmark production in AI. Now, Day Lims and I have some notes here, so excuse me if I go off track. I'm going to try to keep myself on track with these notes. Day Lims and I had very different approaches. Everyone who knows Smile and has heard both mixes can probably tell, but I tried to stick pretty close to stuff that already existed. I never changed or removed any Beach Boys vocals that already existed on the project. All I did was fill gaps where known Beach Boys vocals, or rather known Brian Wilson arrangements, needed Beach Boys vocals to fill them in. And in that way, Day Lims really went in a different direction. He decided that in some cases, songs, now, for example, I'm going to get into this in a minute, Child is Father of the Man, it's pretty certain at this point that would have had two verses based on the 1966 acetate, featuring the verse being repeated multiple times. It's pretty likely that Brian would have included multiple verses on it. So regardless of what Brian was going to do, we don't know what that verse was going to be. The arrangements and the lyrics of those verses are things that Day Lims came up with to fill gaps that probably would have been filled by Brian, but we don't really have any information about how they would have been filled. In addition, he also went and completely re-recorded with Beach Boys AI trained models pieces of the record that had been recorded but perhaps didn't get the mix or maybe the level of perfectionism that we think Brian would have finished with. That also is a completely interesting and important take on this album. It's definitely different to my approach, and it's also ethically and morally different from my approach. And I don't want to stand on the soapbox and scream about ethics because I'm not an ethics guy. I'm barely a musician and I'm barely a programmer. So let's stick to the things I'm barely and not the things I'm not at all. But I will say that introducing new lyrics and perhaps even using another person's vocals and voice to create new artistic expression, I believe that it's important. And I believe that in order to move forward with this technology and the industry in general, we're going to have to embrace new technology the same way we embraced auto-tune, the same way we embraced digital recording and, digital pianos, guitar, things like Melodyne, guitars going through, different pedals and whatnot. These were all innovations that seemed scary when they started, and we got to a point where we decided that it could work out. But this is a little bit different since it involves bringing unrelated, non-consenting parties into it. I will say, Dalims made a good point to mention that Van Dyke Parks had heard some of these things and had given them a thumbs up. I'm sure that thumbs up wasn't really intended to be any form of consent, rather just saying this journey you're going on is something that I think is exciting and worth going on. And I think that is more than the endorsement that anybody could ever dream of for a project like this. I think it was perfect. I don't think that Dalims did anything wrong. I just think that it raises additional moral and ethical questions I kind of outlined here. And I'm going to be kind of selfish and say I don't really care about those things. I can accept them. I can say that I wouldn't necessarily want to push that boundary myself, but I can say I wanted to hear this stuff. I wanted to hear what new vocals came out of Brian Wilson's voice through Dalims' performances, arrangements, and writing. And I didn't really care about those ethical and moral things, although they're still important to consider, even if I don't care about them. And there's something that I decided not to push, and he decided to. So without further ado, let's just go into some of the specifics here. There's too much to say and everybody's heard it, but I want to highlight a few things that I think from my experience with Book Off Smile deserve to be mentioned. So first and foremost, going with You're Welcome at the beginning, very interesting choice. You're Welcome, by my ear, I might be wrong about this, but You're Welcome kind of teeters with C sharp and teeters into the same key as Heroes and Villains, which is, I think, a really cool way to transition. I believe G does as well. And, How I Love My Girl, Who Do Heroes. I think that's also C sharp, but I think it's fascinating because I was kind of expecting when I heard it, well, you're welcome to come, and kind of go a Brian Wilson Presents Smile angle. That was right where I noticed that the hard cuts were going to come into it. Not personally a stylistic choice I would go with. I know Brian Wilson Presents Smile didn't do that. I'm sure the album in 66 would have done that. But with all of the innovation going on here and all of the work that Dalims put into everything else, I do find it fascinating that he went with the choice to kind of have some hard cuts and fade outs. Probably realistic, but not a lot about this project was realistic anyway, let's just be honest. So, he probably could have gone there too. Now, to jump right into Heroes and Villains, the mix is absolutely revolutionary for Heroes and Villains. This is a track that had been bounced down so many times that the instruments had been buried in the mix. Probably one of the worst sounding Beach Boys songs in terms of the engineering, and he has completely pulled this song back into reality. He went with the 66 Brian vocal. I love it. That's the best vocal of the song in my opinion. The Cantina section's been remixed. All of the sections, 3 score and 5, I'm very much alive. That part needed a remix. I actually did it myself. My mix came from somebody else's stereo mix. I built off of it. I did, I'm not remembering exactly where it came from, but I do credit the person on Book Off Smile. I actually had to go in and re-EQ and even use AI to drop the bass down on that part because I felt that the bass was something that on that acetate had been blown out. He agreed, and with his mix, he definitely just completely pulled the mix apart using AI and showed what it's really worth. This song may not have any AI vocals, but it's one of the tracks with the largest improvement thanks to the AI. And in my opinion, it's a direct improvement. There's nothing about Heroes and Villains that could sound better than this. No AI vocals are needed. It's just, or I guess there are a few AI vocals on the end, if I remember correctly, but this is the definitive version of Heroes and Villains at this point for me. There's no reason to listen to the old one for me anymore. On the flip side, Do You Like Worms? Now, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I got a lot of messages about the once upon the sandwich aisle, social structure streamed upon who I... That whole thing. Brian sang the verse in a session. I don't know that I necessarily agree that this was meant to be the melody of the song. I know that's probably a contentious topic, but when you sing it, once upon the sandwich aisle, social structure streamed upon her rock, roll, it kind of sounds, to me, it sounds a little bit too up and down. I know that Dalims mentioned in a few spots that in his kind of AMA format thing he did on YouTube, that he felt that there were some other parts of the record that were too up and down, so he changed them. It is a little fascinating to me that he went that direction here. He pulls just to finish on that last thing with the Do You Like Worms vocals. I love them. I just didn't love them when I first heard them. They took a little bit to grow on me. Now, that's not a problem, but I will say that I think the reason that they stood out and didn't grow on me right away is that they're a little bit jarring. I think they sound great. The performance is fantastic. The arrangement is fantastic. I just don't know if they sound great with the existing rock, roll. They're a little bit more chilled out and a little bit more, I'd say, trippy. In terms of the na 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 na, my wife hates that part. And when I first heard it, I didn't like it either. Not to be too harsh, but she didn't like it. I didn't like it. I listened to it some more and it started to grow on me. And then it really clicked for me when I realized the day before the AMA that that's the If I Only Had in Hawaii, that whole Little Pad part. And I do think Little Pad pulls a bit from the vibes of Do You Like Worms. Ultimately, cool changes. I don't necessarily know if I prefer them to the Waving from the Ocean Liner, rock, roll. It's kind of the same vibe. I don't know if I prefer them. This is a great alternative take, but ultimately, the one thing I do think is a direct downgrade, and I'm not trying to go down on the guy here. I'm not trying to pull him down, but I got to tell you, I'm not a huge fan of the re-recorded vocals on this one. The ribbon of concrete. I don't think my version of it was perfect, but I got to say it's one of the few parts on the record where I actually preferred my AI to his. I mean, I'm literally saying I preferred it almost everywhere else. So to give myself a little bit of credit, I do think that was one of the spots where I still prefer Book Off Smile. To jump into another one, Barnyard is the best track on this project. I don't care what you say about Surf's Up. I don't care what you say about Child's Father of the Man. I don't care what you say about Love to Say Dada. Those were all songs that I think were good on Brian Wilson Presents Smile already. This is a transformation. This version of Barnyard has become one of my favorite tracks on Smile, and it uses so many pieces that we never even considered as parts of Heroes and Villains or parts of Barnyard. And they are just amazing. And I think the AI vocals here are fun. I can tell that Day Limbs had a good time with this. You can see the smile through the track when you look at it. And I love it. I think it's fantastic. It feels Beach Boys. It captures all the right notes. I think that this is not only the definitive version of Barnyard, but now a song that lives on the same level as Day Limbs' Are You There and Walk On By cover, as basically an honorary Beach Boys track, in my opinion. Fantastic. Absolutely amazing. I'm in great shape. I've got to say, I'm a little surprised with how much he took Barnyard and pulled it into its own thing. That I'm in great shape kind of stays as, in the open country, and then the delay. I love it, but I think that it's kind of surprising that with how much he did with Barnyard, he did so little with I'm in great shape. Totally understandable. You don't want to, blow out everything into a 3-minute track, but I do believe that this is one of those other spots where I like what I did with my mix, to kind of extend it with those alternate takes that existed. I think they were cool alternate takes and they went in other directions, and it's a lot of fun. And I know that he pulled in the the Dury Parks acetate. You know what? All cool stuff. But ultimately not as revelatory as Barnyard. Good stuff, but not absolutely, insane like Barnyard. A lot of other tracks like Wind Chimes and Vegetables had really cool new things done with them. I'm not going to harp on it too much because really, in my opinion, they're just like new versions of the songs with some little changes. For instance, Wind Chimes has the like on the left ear. Great addition to the mix. Really fun. Great mixes. Nothing super mind-blowing, but definitely worth existing alternate versions of the songs that are really fun. On the flip side, I have to say that Wonderful is another one of those things where it's like Heroes and Villains, where there's just no reason to go back to the original anymore. in my opinion, except for one thing with this one. Heroes and Villains got away with it, but Wonderful, you can kind of tell that AI has been used on some of these vocals. And I've got to say, this is the moment where I'll say that Wonderful sounds incredible, but the choice to replace the original vocals in some cases with AI, it's why Book Off Smile has some moments that aren't perfect, because the information and the data we have isn't perfect in terms of like the mixes that we currently have. And guess what? That we're not going to be able to pull the vocals out perfectly and get a stereo mix, and having to resort to what he did here. I don't know if it was worth it, in my opinion. And ultimately, while I really love the way the mix sounds, and in my opinion, I'm going to keep going back to this one as my definitive Wonderful, because it really does sound fantastic to listen to, it's not definitive in general because of those replaced vocals. And the same goes for Cabanescence. This is the best Cabanescence has ever sounded. I just don't fully agree with the decision to remake some AI parts. I hope that's not a disrespectful thing to say, but I think that it's a little bit of a bummer, in my opinion, that these mixes are so much better, and I'm sure they needed to have the vocals remade. I'm positive they needed to have them remade in order to get to that point, but I don't think it was worth it. The mixes are really good though, and I ultimately don't have much negative to say about Wonderful besides that. I think it's an absolutely amazing stereo mix. On the same note, the stuff that was done with Fire is really good. I like the vocals that were added, and I love the transition to I Want to Be Around. I do have to say that I don't really agree with the kind of, in my opinion, out of sync, I know that's a little harsh, vocals that start out the track with the I don't love the way those were synced up. I do think it's a valid way to do it. I just think that it's one of the very, very few spots where I feel like it was just not executed properly, rather than just not a good idea, or maybe like an idea I wouldn't have gone with. That said, that's no big deal. It's still a fantastic version of the song, and the transition to I Want to Be Around is awesome. I think that these were some of the weakest AI vocals, in my opinion, but I love the decision to go with Marilyn. I wrote here that Marilyn was a smart choice, and I think that it may have happened back then, but ultimately that Taylor Mills' vocals on Brian Wilson Presents Smile are one of the most Brian Wilson Presents Smile moments on Brian Wilson Presents Smile. So I will say that I don't necessarily know that this is the choice Brian would have made. I think it was a very cool cameo, and if you consider this like the Super Smash Brothers of Smile, this project, which is what I ultimately decide that I feel about it, it was a really fun addition and a fun cameo, a nice Easter egg, and it sounds great. Like I mentioned, though, I don't think that the vocals necessarily nail it in terms of the authenticity. And this might be a good moment to mention that on my mix, I created my Brian Wilson model to be used for Child is Father of the Man. And when you listen to my mix, you might notice that, because I think Child is Father of the Man is the moment where it sounds the best. And it also drops nicely into Do You Like Worms, because that vocal is in a very similar range and timbre and things like that. Like it fits well with both songs. Doesn't fit so well with Love to Say Dada, which is where we're going next. My mix of Love to Say Dada, I think, is the weakest part of my Smile. There's some parts that work, there's some parts that don't, but on Book Off Smile, I think it's the weakest one, because I couldn't belt. There's a part in Day Lim's AMA where he talks about I couldn't get Mike to pronounce the word the exact way I wanted, or I couldn't get Al to do it. I redid it over and over again. I absolutely feel that. I had the same problem, I could use a drop to drink right now. I was trying so hard to kind of belt it, but it keeps going, I could use a drop to drink right now. It's like he's like humming it almost instead of, belting it. And he nailed it. And I think Al was the right choice for the song. He's, an amazing singer. He's got a really strong voice. And the performance from Day Limbs on this one is fantastic. You got to remember, he's underneath all of that, doing basically impressions. it was great. And I think that Al steals the show on this one. This is one of the best moments on the whole thing. I don't know why he excluded the Hawaii, Hawaii lay beyond the sea. It is a very Brian Wilson Presents Smile moment, but so was, your heart. Like, you could have gone for it, man. It would have been great. So maybe, if he ever goes back to it, I'd like to see those dropped in. If he doesn't, feel free to drop in the Book Off Smile ones. They're out there for you. I think that it kind of completes it for me. I'm kind of surprised he didn't go with Look, Song for Children. Smile AD is known for having one of the best versions of that song, in my opinion. And he made that like 11 years ago and really killed it with the... I mean, that was great. I mean, I don't understand why he didn't go for that here. It's definitely a hard arrangement. I went for it myself recently, trying to create some more Beach Boys models. We'll see what comes of that. It's a lot of work, and it's hard to stay motivated. I give him a lot of credit for following through with this project. It's a big effort, and I think that song might have just been too much for both of us. I don't know how he feels. I don't remember hearing how he feels about it, but it's a lot of work. There's a lot of parts. It's going to need a whole vocal arrangement, and to be honest, he's already kind of gotten there with the whole Smile AD thing, and I gotta say, he pulls a lot from Smile AD for Love to Say Dada and some other things. I mean, that's a Smile AD moment. Finally, I want to say that all of his Beach Boys AI models sounded amazing. Particularly standing out are his Brian, Al, and Dennis models. Carl was all right where I could hear it. Bruce sounded good, and I think his Mike model was probably the weakest. There's some moments where it's perfect and some moments where I think it sounded just a little bit too young, maybe. But regardless, I'm not trying to bash it. It sounds fantastic. And if you're not a complete super fan wacko like me, you might not even notice that it's not exactly spot on perfect. I know he probably noticed it, but it's extremely difficult to get these things 100%. So what he got is by far the best sounding Mike Love AI. And I think it's great. And I think this is a perfect moment to segue into my final little comments here. What is next for AI music and what is next for Smile? This project to me represents, this is every band member of a band finishing an unfinished album and being an artistic expression from the creator, in addition to being kind of the finishing touches on a artistic statement from another creator. I think that this is a watershed moment. And if Book Off Smile was a cool curiosity that, people were interested in talking about, this is kind of a moment where AI has proven itself as not just a tool, but an artistic tool. This is a paintbrush now. This is a canvas. This is an easel. This is meant to be the next auto-tune, in my opinion. And I don't know where it's going to go, but I do know that Daylims, if you're listening to this at any point, your project is and deserves to be recognized as a watershed moment in AI music. It's a watershed moment in Smile. And I think, honestly, you should release the models. Not just because I don't want to train them, but because, which sounds so funny for me to say out loud. I'm too lazy to do it. But because, honestly, I think that the next step here is for everybody to have their own personalized Smile mix like this. And I know that there's a lot of work that was put into this by the guy, and I know that he's mentioned that he wants to make some more versions before he releases it. I got to be honest with you, you have a talent that not everybody's going to be able to match up to. And it's one of the reasons why I wasn't worried about releasing my model. I think that while there will be plenty of shitty things put together, and there always will be shitty AI versions put out, I believe that we need that stuff, and that for the legitimacy of this AI stuff to keep moving forward, we really need to see it as a way for people to express things, just like a guitar. Like if only one person has that guitar, like Brian Wilson's got Brian Wilson's voice, then in my opinion, it's kind of a little bit strange to hold it back from everybody. And I know he's absolutely not saying he's going to do that, but I think that we've opened Pandora's box, and it's time to hand it out to everybody and just sort of, start using those paintbrushes for stuff. I'm sure the record companies aren't going to like that. I couldn't help but notice that although Book Off Smile was almost immediately flagged, Smile AI has stayed up for quite a while. So Daylim's Smile has stayed up for a while longer than mine. Don't really know why that is. It might be that my mixes are a bit too similar to the originals and his are a little bit more revolutionary. But ultimately, I think the models need to be released. There's not much more to do with Smile. We have a finished version from yet another artist. You know, Brian Wilson finished his version, and now Daylims has finished his. I finished mine. And I think it's just the point where, you know, whether he releases his isolated vocals and let people go to town with them, or, you know, releases the models and let people create their own stuff. I think that at this point, Smile has kind of solidified itself, rather, as an album that we all get to finish. Almost like a set of paints that we're going to paint, you know, we're going to canvas the town and brush the backdrop with. And these pieces of art that he's created are absolutely incredible. And I think that when you listen to the ending of Surf's Up, I can't help but wonder what other beautiful versions we could get if some other talented artists that maybe don't understand the technology as well as I do, and as well as clearly he does, can get their hands on it. Because, you know, it's one part art, but one entirely equal part technology. And I happen to have a tiny bit of art and a good amount of technology, and Daylims has a good amount of art and good amount of tech. But there's plenty of talented musicians and artists who aren't going to understand even what this stuff is doing. I've seen it myself on the Steve Hoffman forums. There are folks who absolutely do not understand what goes into this. You know, this guy, Daylims, had to perform and arrange all of these parts before he dropped them into the AI. And even having a perfect performance isn't enough sometimes for the AI model to do the correct thing. You've got to perform it in a certain way. You've got to know how to perform to the model while still sounding like the original artist. It's tough stuff. And those artists who could produce amazing music with these tools, but don't really understand how they work or what they're even doing with them, what we're doing with them, I think they need the education on it. And I think that, you know, I tried to do that a bit with my Brian Wilson release of the model. And I think Daylims could go a step further and really solidify this stuff, because to be honest, he's just got a lot more talent for this engineering stuff than I do. And I think there's a responsibility now for him to kind of, you know, follow up this artistic masterpiece, I think, with the education part of it. And, you know, make sure that everybody understands what this is, what it does. And, you know, I think it might be a little bit pompous of me to say he's got a responsibility to do it, but I really think he could do good things for the art and technology world if he did. So I'll shut up now. I've wasted, it looks like, 30 minutes of your time, so I'll shut up now. Thanks for listening, and I hope that the future of Smile is as bright as it is at this moment, because, man, who would have thought that in 2023, 12 years after the release of the Smile Sessions, we're almost to the day, that we would still be talking about new Smile stuff. Even if it's not directly from Brian and the boys' mouths, we're still talking about new Smile art coming out, and that's amazing. So ultimately, no matter how you feel about it, just consider that this music is inspiring people 50 years after it was recorded. Awesome. Thanks for listening.